everybody, it's Jo Parr, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group. Are you feeling stuck with your Gundog training? Trust me, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to be here. Every week, we're bringing you the best tips and hacks to make training your Gundog easy peasy. We'll keep it straightforward, no fuss, just actionable guidance that you can put straight to use. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Found It, Fetched It. This week we are going to be talking all about the importance of a release command when working with a pet gun dog. Joining me for this week's episode is LWDG group expert Samantha Thorneycroft-Taylor. How are you today, Sam?
I'm really well, thanks, Jo. I am back indoors, out of the cold, and warming up nicely in front of the fire.
With Christmas just around the corner and us finding time for training our dogs so limited, I suppose, like this is one of the big things with why we're doing the 21-day challenge in the groups. I think that this topic is really important because we are almost rushing through our training a little bit if we've got a lot on, like running between schools and parties and appointments. So let's talk about what's the purpose of a release command in our training?
So the release command, I think, it's something that is often overlooked and or forgotten about, or even put in some points, but not in others. So it's not fully utilized. But essentially, the release command is about releasing a dog from a behavior to either another behavior or to a reward, or, you know, even to the dinner or anything like that. There are so many different places that we can use it, and it can help link in with impulse control, self-control, general steadiness. It's got so many uses, and I think, like I said, they are often overlooked, but I'm really looking forward to sort of delving deeper into it with you today.
When you suggested it as a topic, I was like, well, actually, this is quite fascinating because, like, I know within our membership, we teach our members how to do everything. Pretty much that's what the membership is all about. But for people to understand on our podcast, like, the reasons why certain things are taught, I think is really interesting. Like, releasing something, releasing your dog is like one of those things I suppose most of us forget to do, don't we? And then inadvertently, if we think about it, if we sit and like mull it over in our heads, we consistently let them break whatever the last command was if we don't release.
We do, exactly. And I think two of the most common ones for me are either you've walked your dog up the road, you've gone into the field or the woodland, you've taken the dog's lead off, and we've inadvertently slipped into this habit whereby as soon as the lead comes off, the dog legs it. And just if you had like a release command in there, so you had the ability to take the lead off, but for the dog to go, okay, can I go now? It's asking permission to leave. And then you give your release command, which gives it said permission. The other one would be, say, for example, you've recalled your dog, you've rewarded it in the way that it finds rewarding. So be that with touch praise, verbal praise, or a treat, anything like that. And as soon as the dog's had that paycheck, it naffs off again. So we're inadvertently creating this. As soon as I pay you, you're free to go. Where it might be that actually we wanted it to do another behavior, or we were calling it back because we saw a horse rider coming towards us. So we want to praise it for being here, but we don't want it just to leg it again. We want it to then stay with us until said horse rider has passed, and then we can release the dog. So it takes away the need to keep repeating commands, if you like. We haven't got, oh no, stay here, here you go, have another piece of cheese, and no, come back, I haven't finished with you yet, have another piece of cheese, and all that. It's just building more of a relationship and an understanding from the dog that just because they've had their paycheck, just because they've finished that behavior, doesn't mean they can instantly just dive off and do what they please.
I think we see this in loads of stuff, don't we? Like, for example, a delivery of a dummy and then they bouncing around us, or they come in to do like a touch and then they bolt out, or they come in to heel, they're there for 3 or 4 seconds for some of us, and then they're gone again. It's like they don't realize that the command needs to be kept until told otherwise.
Exactly. Even if I've rewarded you for that behavior. So if I'm doing, say, focused heel work, for example, if I want my dog to look at me while I'm doing heel work and keep that eye contact. So it's more, in that instance, it's more like obedience heel work rather than general heel work. But I want to be able to tell my dog they're doing good throughout the exercise. I want to be able to communicate, and for me, as I'm walking around and the dog's looking at me, I'll probably give them a good girl, and I'll mark the good bits. But I don't want them to go, brilliant, job done, I'm free to go. I need that behavior to continue until I say, you're free now, until I give them that release.
Do you think, because our dog's very, very clever, there's somewhere they start associating with the reward being the release? So, like, for example, you can say to a dog, good, and they're like, oh, that's it, over. It's like they're taking it in the wrong place as what it is. It becomes reward release rather than just reward.
Absolutely that, yes. So a lot of dogs will see the praise, particularly a good boy or a good girl or even a good dog, and they'll go, brilliant, I've finished, see you later. And they might not go far. Some dogs will bolt for the horizon at that point. Some might just go, oh, okay, I'm going to go sniff over here instead. But it often comes because we've forgotten, if you like, to really instill this, you stay with me until I release you. Or sometimes we're only using it in half the places that we could use it, which I'll circle back to in a minute. But also as humans, we can get lazy without even knowing we're doing it. So we can praise a dog for an action or a behavior and then just sort of let them go off while we're thinking about the next thing. So we don't even realize we're doing it. And before we know it, the dog does have this history of, as soon as I get my reward, as soon as I get paid, she's not paying attention. So I'm just going to mooch off over here. Thank you.
As we're talking about it now, and I'm sure people listening are doing the same, like you just like, oh, you can almost see the error of what's happened. And you've almost created a bad habit without you wanting to. So in order for us to like prevent this bad habit, we have to, from the beginning, teach our dogs that there's reward, and even if they're a baby, reward release, so the two things come together, but that they see that there is another step to this process.
Yeah, so yes, it's easier if you start teaching it with a young dog, but potentially you're listening to this and you're going, okay, that's maybe another command I want to build in. So you're working with an older dog, or you've rehomed a dog that is older, so you missed their baby years. And certainly in the beginning, I'd probably teach the release in that if I'm working with a puppy, I might sit on the floor and the puppy comes and crawls all over me and I'm giving it lots of praise while it's here. And then I might say, okay, on you go, which is my personal release command. You can use lots of things. People use free, okay, well, anything you want as long as you're consistent with it. But then once I have released the puppy, I'll probably make a funny noise and encourage them back again and just practice the whole kind of, when you hear the phrase from me, on you go, you can go away for a little bit and then you come back. And obviously when I'm playing with them, when I'm giving them that touch praise, that is the reward for being with me. It's the reward and the engagement at that point. And then I'll release them and I'll just practice this. And things like building in recalls. When I recall a puppy to begin with, I'm not instantly going to put a sit on the end of it. But even then, I want my young puppy to learn, come back to me on a recall, stay around my feet, have lots of touch praise, lots of verbal praise, lots of reward, and then stay with me whilst I'm doing all these things until I go, okay, on you go. And I'll probably walk off at that point as well. So I'm encouraging movement away from me for 4 or 5 paces before I then crouch down, make a funny noise and encourage the dog back in again.
And I suppose, like, when you said that, I thought, oh, what is my release word? And my release word is always okay. And you said on you go. And I was like, oh, well, that's quite interesting, because when I want the dogs to continue to hunt an area, like maybe I've stopped them for something, I then say, get on. So that's my like, continue your pattern. So isn't it funny how we all have like, and it doesn't matter what the command is, as long as the dog understands it, like little ways of indicating to our gun dogs what we want next.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you've brought up a really good point. And I, like you, when I'm hunting, I use the phrase get on. So in a sense, that is a release, but it's also a separate command. It's not a release, you're free. It's you're released from the stop, but there is another action coming. So I think even if, your training, my training, the release itself can have multiple different words, if that makes any sense. But for me, on you go is more of a, if I say on you go, it means, you can go out the door that I've opened and you sat next to. On you go is right, into the garden, or out of the truck, or across a track, or being released from a sit in a field. So unless I've got a specific behavior that I need to follow, for all intents purposes, I suppose the release is freedom of some description. Whereas like get on is you don't have to stay in the sit anymore, but you have another action to continue with.
You use get on to start the quartering pattern, because I do. So yes. Maybe get on in this instance for me and for you just means quarter.
Yeah, I do exactly that. So for me, get on is start your quartering, and I don't use get on for any other action. My dogs have learned if I say out, if I say back, that's a retrieve. If I say get on, it means I want the quartering pattern. So to that end, I wouldn't use get on if I wanted my dogs just to mooch around and have their relative freedom.
Fascinating. When I listen to you and when I train with you, it's like I see Dad's way of training in you. So I don't know where you both learned it from the same person down the line. I don't know. But it's quite interesting, like how people do things. But for me, like I know for Dad, his release word was gone away. That was always it. Didn't matter if we were in a field with loads of birds or if we were, I don't know, walking through a park. It basically meant he would put whatever he was using, whether that was cold game or a tennis ball, into his dummy bag, and he'd go gone away. And that meant, right, we're done with this now. And I think that's what you're saying, isn't it? Like with me, when I say, okay, might mean I'm going to pull my phone out and go on my phone, or I'm going to go back to talking to Matt. It means that wherever I stopped you to do is done with, and now you can go back to mooching and doing whatever you want to do, because now that's your time.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, you say give stories about your dad and stuff, and I see similarities as well. And I think it's another of those ways of training that, whilst comes from an old place, it's traditional in that sense, it's still not traditional in the sense that many people believe gun dog trainers are. It's a fair way of saying consistently to your dog, we're done, you're free, go play. Obviously, freedom always has rules and boundaries. It doesn't mean just because I've released you from a sit whilst we saw the deer at the other side of the field, that freedom doesn't now mean you're allowed to go and chase them, because in my opinion, dogs should never do that with deer. But I think, I said earlier, and I said I was going to circle back to it and I forgot, a lot of dogs will have, or a lot of humans will have an inbuilt, when I sit my dog up for its meal times, it gets released to eat. Or when I open a door, it gets released to go out. When I get them in and out of the car, it needs that release in order to be able to continue that activity. But they do forget that you can use it in so many other ways as well. So I think I touched upon it earlier, taking the lead off isn't the signal for freedom. You mentioned it before we started this podcast. It could be safety. It could be that you've reached a road, and it's a quiet road. You don't need your dog at heel or on a lead to cross it. But as you step off the pavement or step off the verge, you want to be able to say to them, okay, you're free within reason to go on now, or to move at least. But I use it a lot in amongst my general free time with my dogs. If I'm just taking my dogs for a walk, I will look at their body language and I will look at my surroundings. I think I've always said, keep one eye on the dog and one eye on the environment. If I see or hear something, if I see something from my dog, or if I see something or hear something in the environment that makes me think my dog is getting just a little bit excited now, I need to bring them back down to earth, then I'll probably bring them into heel for a bit. Hopefully You know, most of them have got off lead heels, so I don't have to worry about putting a lead on, but I can just keep them at my heel, walk past or towards or round, whatever the distraction was. And then when I'm ready and I feel that the dog's body language is now much calmer, I can then say, okay, on you go. And that's their kind of, again, their release. You know, I had to bring you back for a little bit of guidance for whatever reason, and now you're free to go again. And I'll do that multiple times through a walk, depending on the dog and depending on the environment.
I see it a bit like, do you know when you get on a running machine and you like clip that thing on, so if you fall like an idiot and go flying off the edge, you'll stop the running machine. I see it a bit like that because, let's be honest, like if you've got spaniels and some Labradors as well, even the word good is like giving them a box of Smarties. They're like clowns, isn't they? So I see it as they're like, if I say to Ella or Rex, good, and I can see it, I mean, even the word, like they like started to ramp up and accelerate their energy, that releases my my safety code, should we say, because, and I'm sure you've seen it with the people that you train, it's the fact that sometimes we say the rewards, we shouldn't have rewarded, I do that, but also like when you like inadvertently do it, like the dog's done really well and you've gone good, and then if you're not thinking about where you've used that reward word or why you've even used that reward word, because it's become habit, that sort of release word is the way that you stop you messing up the dog's training.
It is, yeah. And actually, I'm glad you said that, because I had an interesting epiphany. I don't know if it's an epiphany you'd call it, a hindsight moment, whatever the phrase is, when I was filming one of my Christmas challenges. And I filmed it on a snowy day because in my head it felt appropriate that it was snowing and it was a Christmas challenge. And of course, England being England, we never know when we're going to get snow again. So whilst I was filming this challenge, I was starting to get cold. And although the dog wasn't cold, there was every chance that, you know, he was going to get cold if I carried on even more. So when it's snowing, I don't need to ask my dogs to sit, in my opinion. You know, I can drop the sit. But I had my dog Zip in front of me and I said, stand. And as I turned to walk away, I said, stay there. And then as I walked back up the track, I thought, you know what? I've never taught this dog stand and I've never taught this dog stay there. But because I hadn't used his release command, he did stay there. And he didn't go into a sit because I'd not asked him for a sit. So he stayed there in a stand, despite the fact that the two words I'd just spoken to him meant absolutely nothing to him. And I think that, again, is a good example of where humans can mess up. You know, trainers are always learning. We're not perfect either. But because I hadn't used his release command, he was waiting for it or another command before he moved off the spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I train with mental, and like sometimes he gives me the biggest rouse for the amount of words that come out of my mouth that are total garbage. But like the dog will do something wrong, and then he like pull the dog back because he's more blunt with me than he is with the dogs. And I'm like, okay, so I pull the dog back, I recall the dog, and then I'm like, good dog. And he's like, what's the good dog? The dog did something wrong. And I'm like, but he just did this bit, right? Like this tiny bit when he actually just came back to me. And he's like, no, like, but then when he says that to me, I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely right. He didn't, you know, the dog needs to come back to me because I'm about to correct and send him back out or whatever I'm going to do. But it's in our heads, we have been so used to training things in tiny, tiny blocks. Like we're constantly like going, good, well done. And like, we don't even realize we're doing it. We're like yabbering idiots, aren't we?
I think sometimes we do say a lot more than we need to do, but particularly if we're training or progressing what can be quite a complex task. And that can either be in, I don't know, maybe you've got 5 dummies out and you need a specific direction to get the correct one. Or for some dogs, that complex task at the beginning might just be maintaining heel for more than 5 seconds. So it's good to be able to communicate with the dog that what they're doing is right, without the dog believing that when you say that, it can then bog off as it chooses. You know, and the recall one, like you just said, is in my opinion, slightly controversial at times, because on the surface, absolutely, if a dog didn't do right, it needs to come back and get reset and starting again. I would then normally put in a low level good or a thank you, which my tone of voice is more what gives the signals kind of, okay, well, we kind of got to where we needed to be for now, but you could have tried harder. You know, and then you obviously set them up and send them out again. But a lot of the times, I'm going off a bit of a rabbit hole here, which is nothing unusual for me. A lot of the times, for example, if a dog has ignored a recall, we might forget to tell them that ignoring is unacceptable. So then we truly believe when they get back that we either can't praise them or we have to praise them because they've come back. And I think that's where mixed messages, again, can come in with dogs. For me, if I've given a recall and the dog hasn't responded to it, it gets that interrupter or that consequence, which is or oi. That's not acceptable. And when they get back, they'll get that thank you. So it's not over the top praise. It's just an acknowledgement.
I suppose it goes back to our hierarchy of rewards. It's like a good okay or a good. It's like good and this was like 5 out of 10 good. It's like good. Like it's just not there. And the bizarre thing is, I suppose, that reward means so much to our dogs. They can actually completely tell without a doubt what we mean, even if we say the same word. And again, we have to be aware of that, don't we?
We do. It all comes down to our body language and our tone of voice, the way we're communicating. You know, if we give them a good, and we get all excited and we smile with our eyes and we're maybe going, yay, we've done this. You know, the dogs are like, wow, I did good. I did okay. And then if we give them a good, they go, oh, actually, we didn't have so much of a party this time. So maybe I'll try harder next time. I really want that good payout, be it verbally or actual physical treat rewards, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But they do pick up on it a lot.
I suppose it's the same as all those people now waiting at Christmas to see if they're going to get a £10 Christmas voucher or a turkey off their boss. And just to sort of like start wrapping this conversation up and this podcast up, though, like where we use the release word and we use it properly, it encourages that calmness in our dogs, doesn't it? And that's the thing we're looking for all the time, is a beautiful, well-behaved dog that has super fun with us, that everything is easy breezy, lemon squeezy, and you can go out and enjoy the time with them.
Exactly. I think it encourages continued engagement. And obviously engagement is super, super important if you're trying to get anything from your dog. And so if they're waiting for that release, waiting for that permission, but then they're sort of, you know, they're consistently trying, they're asking you, can I please go off and play? They're asking you, can I please eat my dinner? You know, and again, it doesn't come back to dictatorship or anything like that. It's general manners, self-control, trained obedience, impulse control, all wrapped into one. And you can use the release to release them to a reward as well. So I think Claire and Jem do similar, but for example, if I'm starting to introduce a stop whistle at a little bit of distance, then once the dog has stopped, I will generally throw a toy sort of in their direction. Everybody does train this bit slightly differently, but I might throw it in their direction. I want the dog to not just learn stop until something leaves my hand. I need the dog to learn stop until I tell you otherwise. So as I throw that reward, I will add in my release cue. And so that's, again, giving the dog permission. They've stopped. My reward is something that they can then pick up and retrieve to me. But I need them to know that they've got to wait for permission to go and get it. Otherwise, further down the line in my stop whistle training, I'm essentially setting myself up for a much harder time.
It's quite interesting you say that, because if I'm going to throw an unsteady retrieve, like just for fun on the beach or whatever, as I use my hand, I am like literally like, okay. And then, because they know that means like, go wild in the aisles, do whatever you want. They literally will instantly release. But otherwise, 99.9% of the time they won't. If you see my Instagram reel from this week, you'll see that there are times when they just decide to do what they want. But they're very few and far between, I tend to find. Thank you for another amazing podcast. I encourage all listeners, and I know Sam does too, to evaluate your current use of the release command. Are you using it? How can you implement some improvements on it to get the best out of your dog and to give your dog the best chance at succeeding in everything the two of you do together? For those of you wanting to deep dive into how to teach the command and improve your steadiness, go into our membership resources. There's loads there to help you. You will find exactly what you need. Please share your experiences with us, your fun stories. Me and Sam shared some little stories there about how we've had good and bad moments with our releases. We would love to know how your release, if you haven't used it before, now goes on to impact your training. This will be one of our last few podcasts before Christmas. Our last podcast before Christmas will be on the 22nd of December. And then myself and the lovely experts are having a well-deserved break over Christmas, which we hope you are having too. And we'll be back with you on the podcast on the 11th of January. So don't think we've gone away permanently, because we haven't. We're just going to have a little break. Thank you, Sam, for your amazing expertise as always on this topic. If people are looking for you on Instagram, Facebook, where can they find you?
Search for Languedoc Gundogs or Canine Foundation. As to the actual handles, I think they're called, I'm afraid I can't help you out with that one because I'm not very technology minded.
I'm sure I can find them and add them into the show notes. If you're looking for the Ladies Working Dog Group, it's at Ladies Working Dogs. You'll find Sam tagged there somewhere, definitely without a doubt, and you can follow that little breadcrumb trail straight to her account. Thank you all for listening to us again this week. We hope you've enjoyed. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any ideas for podcasts you'd love us to do, please let us know. And we're 3 years in now, and we would love to know what you guys want us to talk to you about as well. Let us know what you think as well, and we look forward to speaking to you all next week. That's it for today's episode. A massive thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to head over to the LWDG and sign up for our membership. Get access to expert-led training, a wonderfully supportive community, and the resources you need to become a confident and skilled gun dog trainer. Let's take this journey together, because no woman should have to train her gun dog alone. We'll see you all next week.